Welcome into a new edition of Inside the Huddle right here on High School Cube News. Brian Chimino with you once again with Mike Clark of the Sun-Times and Beth Long of Fox Sports and Scout.com. Take a deep breath. Week 4 was a lot calmer than the first 3 weeks. All top 13 teams in the Super 25 victorious, so nobody changing spots. But then you get down to that number 14 spot, and we're talking about Mount Carmel. Another tough loss this past week, their third of the season. This one to their bitter rivals, St. Rita, 23-21. The difference, a field goal with 23 seconds left.
This one went back and forth, 3 lead changes in the last 6 minutes. Mount Carmel just can't quite seem to close the deal. Obviously, that was an issue in week 1 against St. Joe's out of Philly. Then they had an easier win for their 1 win, and then they also lost to Providence, which is no slouch. Obviously, we've been talking about them all season. It feels tough to count Mount Carmel out. I mean, now they got to go 4-1 to get to the playoffs. Seems like it's doable just watching them. You know, they do pass the eye test, but they have to get better in some areas. They have to be a little bit more consistent offensively. I mean, they drove the ball really well at the end of the game. They were a little bit inconsistent before that. They gave up some big plays on defense. So it's just about consistency for them, which is what Frank Lundy's been talking about all season pretty much. They just have to get a little bit better at all areas of the game.
And what about the Mustangs, 4-0 on the season?
Just to look ahead a little bit, they've got Providence this week, and that's looking like the probably the Catholic League Blue title game, you know, which a lot of people probably wouldn't have predicted at the beginning of the year. But, you know, Rita has figured out a way to win these close games. They did it in week 1 against Simeon. They've done it against Mount Carmel here. You know, Providence, we've talked about them all season long. I mean, they've just been unstoppable. So that's going to be a great game this Friday night at Rita. Again, probably one of the games of the year.
And on Saturday, it was a defensive struggle, Glenbard West and Lions. Glenbard West, though, exploding in the fourth quarter with 3 touchdowns to win 28-14. Glenbard West, obviously 4-0.
Lions is kind of a funny team, you know. I mean, we thought that they were going to be pretty good at the beginning of the year. They've got Leonard Ross, who's a D1 running back. They've got a pretty good quarterback, an experienced kid, and Tommy Fiedler. So not a huge surprise that they played Glenbard West tough, but, you know, Glenbard West at home, really tough to beat. I mean, you know, they just got things going so well with the defense and with their running game, too. You figured that they were going to find a way to win somehow, and they did.
And one game we previewed last week, number 1 Stevenson versus undefeated Lake Forest. Stevenson prevailed in that one, 34-17, and I think it was the first time this season Stevenson did not have to come from behind.
The thing that impresses me about them is the depth with their receivers. I mean, they've got some other guys, you know, who have been able to take a little bit of the attention away from Green, so the defenses can't really pay too much attention to him. But, you know, Stevenson's still rolling on.
And as we look ahead to week 5, we already mentioned Providence and St. Rita, but what about number 13, LincolnWay East, at number 2, Homewood Flossmoor?
That's going to be an interesting one. Only loss for HF so far was to Stevenson in one of the weather games a few weeks ago. LincolnWay East, their loss was to Oak Park River Forest in another weather-delayed game. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. LincolnWay East has got a couple of running backs now with Alex Kraft and Liam Morrissey, who've done a pretty good job for them. They can throw the ball a little bit with Mike Weller. HF has got obviously a really diverse ground game with the Harley Hampton twins, and they can throw the ball a little bit with Bryce Gray. A lot of prospects on both sides in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. The one that stands out the most is HF offensive lineman. He's a junior, Desmond Bland. I saw them game 1 of the season, and I was very impressed with their entire offensive line. A couple of younger guys as well behind Bland, even sophomores play on that line. They don't look like sophomores. They don't look like juniors. That is probably the largest height and weight-wise line I've seen all season. So I think that they may actually end up being the key to this one, because if they can play like I saw them play in week 1, it's going to be really hard to stop those 2 twins coming from behind that line. On the other side of the ball, LincolnWay East, a prospect that I'm really intrigued by is Liam Morrissey. He's got size. He's 6'1". From what I'm hearing, not getting a ton of recruiting attention right now, but that could change. All you need is a really good first 3 or 4 game film for the season, and I think that he might have a chance for sure to getting some pretty big nods on the college level.
And finally in week 5, the number 3, Glenbard West. We just talked about the Hilltoppers. They have another big one against 3-1 Hinsdale Central.
That's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, Hinsdale Central kind of threw everybody off in week 1 by beating Bolingbrook, who was the consensus number 1 and has kind of quietly been playing pretty well since. So Hinsdale Central, certainly a team that Glenbard West can't overlook. But again, you know, it's just until somebody beats Glenbard West in the West Suburban Silver, it seems to be their league. So we'll see how that one plays out.
And last week, we sort of previewed some Player of the Year candidates. We talked about Justin Hunterford from Providence along with Miles Boykin. They both had big games, put up big numbers. Again, seems like they might be able to split the vote at the end of the year.
Yeah, that might be the only thing that holds either one of them back. I mean, Hunterford, got a lot of praise from Marmy and Coach Dan Thorpe, which is who Providence played last week. He said that people talk about the receivers, Miles Boykin and Nate Vovoda, but really a lot of it goes back to Hunterford just making the right decisions about who to throw the ball to or whether to run himself. Hunterford is just really one of the breakout players. I mean, everybody knew that he was coming back from last year, but I don't think anybody expected this kind of a season from him.
And last week we talked about Dwayne Collins from Phillips, and he had a big weekend both on and off the field.
They had a pretty easy win, nothing surprising there, but he also got his first offer and he didn't wait too long to think about it.
No, he committed to Illinois State. Was offered Friday, committed right after the game on Friday. We seemed pretty excited about it. He is actually the MVP this week on High School Cube News, but also to keep an eye on for the rest of the season.
And outside of Dwayne Collins committing to Illinois State, you got to have a lot more recruiting stuff.
Biggest recruiting note this week, Miles Boykin is going to play in the Semper Fidelis All-American game out in Carson, California, which will be January 4th. Another prospect that has added a few offers, Sean Foster of Carmel Catholic added an offer from North Carolina State and Purdue. He's an offensive lineman, absolutely one to watch. He's got 10 offers under his belt at this point.
And that'll wrap up another edition of Inside the Huddle here on High School Cube News. Keep checking the site throughout the week for all your write-ups and results of high school football here in Week 5. From Mike Clark and Beth Long, I'm Brian Chimino, and we'll see you next week.